My name is Sandy Denninger, and I am working with the Elmhurst History Museum to document experiences from immigrant and first generation families who reside in the DuPage area as part of a 2022 immigration exhibit. Today is Friday, December 10th, 2021, and this interview is taking place at the Elmhurst History Museum. So thank you, both of you, for coming in today.
Thank you.
If you could each state your name and where and when you were born.
Peter Cotsirilos. I was born in Melrose Park, and it was 1950, March 23rd.
I'm Elaine Thomopoulos. I was born January 1st, 1940 in Elmhurst.
Excellent. And if one of you could do the honors of stating your father's name and where he immigrated from.
My father, George Cotsirilos, immigrated from Agios Vasilios in Tripolis in Greece.
Cotsirilos is just located outside of Tripoli. Yeah.
So that locates it in the area because there's more than one Agios Vasilios. So.
Tripoli is a big city.
And do you know when your father was born?
Yes, he was born in 1908.
Excellent.
March 17th.
15th.
March 15th.
I'd like to ask first if there were any stories that you recall. I know you mentioned your dad was fairly young when he came to the United States, but anything that he shared with you that he recalled about living in Greece? Any fond memories?
He was only 12 when he came, and he didn't talk a lot about his experience about coming. I know that he came with his older sister, and it was poor then, and he really came to make a better life for himself and his family.
Yeah, I believe it's right after World War I, and a lot of people are coming over from Europe. And when he did come over, it's interesting, he came over and they saw his name, which was Cotsirilos, not an easy name to pronounce or spell, so they suggested maybe, was it later on they suggested it?
No, he changed it.
He changed it to Rilos.
They did not suggest it. I found the documentation. And he changed it to Rilos and then back to Cotsirilos. So we didn't know that. I mean, I'm just going through all the papers, and I had no idea his name was Rilos. But he changed it from Cotsirilos to Rilos, back to Cotsirilos again. So there was, that, like he said, a lot of people, and so we have relatives that were known as Rilos.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of the Greek names have been shortened because they're hard to pronounce and hard to spell.
And he was in business, so he probably thought maybe it would be better. Who knows? He had his father that had came several times before him. So the Greeks would come here, work to go back and give money back home. So his father came maybe 2 or 3 times to work in a factory here.
But always returned back to Greece?
He always returned back to Greece. He never stayed here. But there were, he even came after his daughter emigrated. Yeah.
Did his father ever come to permanently live in the U.S.?
No, never.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about it was a little after World War I. Do you know a little bit more approximate date of when your dad came?
1921.
Okay.
Because I did just find that out. That's why I know he was 12. He was born in 1908, but he came in January 1921. His birthday was you didn't say it right, but March 15th.
March 15th, yeah.
Okay, excellent. You were talking about how it was a poor time, and it was likely that he, came to have a better life. Anything else that he shared about the journey he took to actually get to the United States?
I never heard anything from him about the trip.
He never spoke.
No. When he did come over, though, he did start working selling fruits and vegetables on the street. I believe it was horse-drawn carriage at the time. Eventually, he went on to have 2 or 3 or 4 stores. I can go over the whole history if you want that, but he started selling fruits and vegetables in alleys in Chicago.
He lived with his sister, his older sister, and according to my cousin, which I'm not sure that's true, my cousin had told me he was either a stowaway, or another story was that his older sister said it was her son. We can't find them in the register. I know as far as some papers I said that he said he came in through New York, but we couldn't find. I couldn't find them.
through Ellis Island.
I couldn't find his name. I couldn't even find his sister's name. So I'll have to do more.
That's what I thought he came through.
Yeah, I think he did, but who knows?
What was the age difference? How old was his older sister?
Someone between 7 and 10 years difference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
yeah.
he had relatives here when he came.
He had relatives that were not real close relatives. He did. He did have. I think he had some uncles that were here, and there was a whole group of people that had come earlier, so that it wasn't like he was just coming alone, but it was a very close-knit family group, very close-knit.
At what point do you know, like, did he spend any time in the New York area, or as far as you know, he came straight to Chicago area?
I think he came straight here
Chicago.
because that's where his family was.
Do you know about where in Chicago they were living?
His sister lived in Maywood with her husband, and so from what I understand, I think he lived with his sister because he was just a kid, like 12.
What was your dad's knowledge that you know of the English language before he came to the United States?
No,
He didn't know
nothing.
No.
And luckily, he must have been literate because he could read newspapers when he was literate, but I don't think he did much more after he was 12. And I don't know what he did. He was from a farm. I saw where they lived. It was really tiny,
Right.
it's very tiny.
His formal schooling was when he came here, he had no more formal schooling.
Yeah,
So-
so he did know, at least he was literate. His
Yeah.
father was not literate. When his father came here to work, his father was not literate.
So
Neither was his mother, I don't think.
To your knowledge, he didn't pursue any sort of continued school.
No, he
No.
took speech one time. He wanted to learn to be, so he took like continuing ed. I remember as I was growing up, I remember he was going to school for that, but I don't think so. I'm not for sure.
So tell me a little bit about what stories he may have shared, or how you came to learn about him very early on selling these fruits and vegetables in the alleyways. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
What I learned, some word of mouth from my relatives and himself, how he started. And that, like I said, it was his horse-drawn carriage at the time, but then I went on to a truck. Then he went on to have a store. I believe his first store was in Hinsdale, a small fruit market. From there, he decided to move to Elmhurst, and he opened up another store, another fruit market in Elmhurst, called the White Front Fruit Market. I believe Hinsdale was the same thing, White Front Fruit Market.
Really?
Yeah.
144 York Avenue.
Yeah, that's where the original one was.
Yeah, the White Front
Right.
in Elmhurst. And then he opened up in the 50s, he opened up Elmhurst Grocerland.
Yeah, but he had a store. There was an A&P that opened up on Addison. It would be just west of York Road, and there was an empty lot nearby, next door, as a matter of fact, of the A&P. A&P was maybe 10,000, 12,000 square feet, maybe 15. At the time, it was a huge store. My father opened up a 5,000 square foot store which specialized in fruits and vegetables and fresh meat. He also had a full line of groceries too, a small line. But people would go to the A&P and buy their canned goods at the A&P, and then come over to my father's store to buy the fruits and vegetables and the meats, because he had the best, and then that's what they liked. So
He used to go to the market.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but he used to go to the market
it was called the South Water Market.
like
South
at 3,
Water Street.
4 o'clock. And he did have, I think, an uncle or cousins that actually sold bananas there.
Yeah.
Actually, even at early age, there was the Greek, businessmen that were established.
To this day, Adam Banana is owned by the Gatsiolases, who are his cousins, and were his cousins at the time. Adam Banana is a huge banana house, and Panama Banana is also his cousins or relatives, and they own the other banana house on the South Water Market. So I mean, they had the banana business for Chicago for many, many years, and they still do. I mean, they still are big.
At the beginning of the century, I think. There's something on it. I found something.
Yeah.
At
the time, South Water Market was the place to go to buy your fruits and vegetables, and then they would distribute it to all the stores. At that time, the stores were small, so you had the trucks going to each of the stores, distributing to the stores. And eventually, South Water Market, which probably started in the early 1900s, became outdated. The trucks were too big for with the market itself, and eventually, I believe in the 70s and 80s, they decided to close the South Water Market. It's now a townhome development, and they moved out to a southern suburb where a lot of the vendors went to sell their fruits and vegetables. Just like Fulton Market used to sell all the meats. Now that's gone. It's all being developed, and all the meat companies are scattered. So things have changed. I mean, it's sort of amazing to see how they've changed over the years. But my father was very successful at what he did. He started these small stores. Eventually, he opened up he bought another store in Bensonville, a bigger store, which was maybe 8,000 square feet, 9,000, did very, very well there. And in 1968, they decided to team up with, at the time it was called Certified Grocers, and they decided to start opening up supermarkets. And I'm sorry, Central Grocers started opening up supermarkets, and they were building them like the chain stores would. So 20,000, 25,000 square foot stores were being put up. My father took his store in Bensonville, assembled the lots across the street to about 2.5 acres, and built a 25,000 square foot store. At that time, that was one of the biggest. So he was very successful with that. He, in the grocery business, is well known, and he did very, very well. So,
he was active in a lot of community organizations, especially the Greek community. He was there's a church in Elmhurst that he was instrumental, the Greek Orthodox Church, St. Demetrius in Elmhurst. He was instrumental in starting that.
Yeah, he was a founding father.
Yeah, and he, a lot of his socialization was with other Greek families, because there wasn't a lot of Greek families. I mean, I think he's younger than I am. I'm older than he. When I was starting out like a kid, there might have been 5 or 6 families, Greek families.
So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. Coming into a town where maybe there isn't as much diversity or others who have your same history, do you recall any challenges that came up because you weren't quite have the same history as the other families that lived here? In that time period?
I didn't feel it. I really didn't. I don't know. Sometimes you're blind to it, but I just never felt any problem with it. I don't know if you did.
I didn't. I mean, I never felt that way. I know a lot of my friends were Italians, and a lot of them were Greek, and a lot of them were different ethnic groups. And never, in my mind, it really didn't matter. I mean, they're just people and they're friends. It wasn't... the ethnicity didn't matter at all to me. And so I never felt that I was, looked down upon or up upon or whatever. It's just, I had a good childhood in Elmhurst. I think Elmhurst has always been a great community to grow up and to live in. And, we lived, most of our, growing up was in Elmhurst. It started out 230 Michigan, near downtown. And then he bought a house in Poplar on Poplar Street, 303 Poplar, which is in the Huntington. Was it Huntington?
No,
subdivision.
I don't
Brenthaven. Brenthaven subdivision. So it's probably the only house that was not built by the guy who built the Brunhaven development, he was he had his own architect for that.
Sather.
Yeah, John Sather, who was also from Elmhurst.
Yeah, I think he was also very prominent in the community. So, because of being with the public all the time. My mom also worked. My mom wasn't an immigrant, but she was a daughter of immigrants. So they were very compatible, and they worked both of them worked in the grocery store, and we worked in the grocery store. It was a family business.
Right. The Greek community, they stay together through the church. It's big. It always has been. Lately, it's changed over the years, but back in the day, when the Greeks got together, it was through the church, and it was important for the children to go to Greek school and learn the Greek language. The heritage is Greek Orthodox Church was very instrumental in keeping the Greek people together. Over the years, it's not as strong as it was, but I think the church means a lot to the Greek community.
Yeah, it did, and we went all the way. I mean, I went like an hour by bus before my mom started driving, or because my father sometimes didn't go. And we went to the Assumption Greek Orthodox Church in the Austin area of Chicago. I still go there. And later they built the St. Demetrius in Elmhurst. But I think the church and the family, because like all our cousins would always get together. Even my father's cousins, we would always be very close. And we would hang out in Maywood House, and it was very cohesive. And even here, the few Greek families, my mom was really close to Lenicus family. There were only one child, but I used to play with him. And and I think most of their socialization was with the Greek community, although he was known and they were known, everywhere. They were, donors at the hospital, and I think he might have been at the Elks. I have to check that out. But most of their socialization was with the Greek community, because they felt, and they really, pressed my sister and I, especially Stathia says so, to marry Greek. It was like, and we both did. Not for the third and fourth child, but
that was actually one of my questions. So
yeah,
they would have liked for me to marry a Greek. Let me put it that way. As a matter of fact, my father met my mother at a Greek Orthodox church picnic. Now, Greek picnics, you might have seen St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church picnic. Well, every year each church would have their picnic, and all the Greeks from all over the area would come over and have the souvlaki and have the Greek food and Greek dancing, and it's a big thing in the summertime. So my father met my mother at a Greek picnic. My mother, it was second generation. She wasn't from Greece, but she was 100% Greek. But they always wanted me to go to the Greek picnics to meet somebody who was also Greek. And I've met some very nice Greek women, but I ended up marrying an Italian.
So did your dad, prior to the establishment of the church in Elmhurst, as far as you're aware, your dad was going to Assumption?
Yeah, I think he might have even been on the board there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see the name, although I think it was his name, but and I have to check that out, because there's a lot of George Cotsirilos. Cotsirilos is a very unique name. Everybody's related who's Cotsirilos, and so then there's a lot of them. But
going back to his first store, the White Front Fruit Market, do you know about when that closed? Did it close and then he opened the grocery?
He closed it when he opened it,
right.
And it was the early 50s. I have some stuff from Elmhurst Groceryland that you might want for your files, and I'm going to try to find something for. In fact, your museum gave me some little bit of an ad from that you found on White Front Fruit Market.
Yeah,
but it was he didn't close it. It was like a transition. He had to wait. He had trouble getting it built. He had the Grocerland, but eventually it got built, and they put everything into it. I mean, they really did. My mom and dad worked. My mom worked along with my dad.
Yeah. Interesting little side story is when he had the grocery land, he used to every night take the deposit in a bag, take it over to the Elmhurst National Bank, where it used to be on the corner here on Park, and open the on the side of the building there was a drawer that you had a key for. You open it up, put your deposit in, a night deposit, and close the door. Somebody must have been watching him doing
Every
this,
day.
and one time he got mugged, and they knocked him out and took his bag, and never found out who did it or what happened.
In Elmhurst.
In Elmhurst.
Oh, almost, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a few thousand, a couple $1,000s, whatever it was at the time. It was a lot of money at the time. About 10 years later, somebody was remodeling a house, or maybe it was longer than that. Somebody was remodeling a house and tearing out a wall, and sure enough, they found the bag from that.
They did?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
See, all kinds of things I'm finding
They found the bag from that robbery. Just a little side story.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Now, in those first markets, was your dad pretty much working by himself because it was a small stand? Do you know if he had employees in those early locations?
He had employees.
The first one, he was with he came with his elder sister, and the next sister wanted to come there. My dad was the third child from Ius Vasilis, and so his other sister came, and it was his sister's husband that they had a relationship with, like a partnership. So the White Front Fruit Market, yeah, but he always had employees. I mean, it was like when he opened up Elmhurst Grocerland, it was like a huge thing. It was like had 3 or 4 registers. It was huge. 3, and that was like wow, because you're talking about the early 50s. I think A&P might have come later. I have to check that out.
No, I don't think so. I think they were there. But
it was interesting. It was like I said, we all worked, at least I did and Peter did for sure.
So with his sister being in the Maywood area, did he ever share with you why he ultimately chose to kind of settle and establish himself a bit more in the Elmhurst area?
He also was in Clarendon Hills, I think. It was within the communities, but I don't know why he decided, but I think because his work was out there. First, I think he was in Clarendon Hills. Remember Rula and her husband?
I remember Rula, yeah.
Yeah. It was with the father, I think. Her husband's father. But anyway, he was in business here. I don't know why. I don't know why he decided, but his businesses were here. Well, he was so close. 230 Michigan was like just a couple blocks away. So it was really convenient when he went to White Front Fruit Market.
Oh, he'd walk to work. He used to have a truck. We'd go to the market. She mentioned he'd get up at 3 a.m, and he did that almost every day. So it's funny, in the grocery land, he would take that truck, go down the market, they'd fill it up down there, take it to the store, empty it, and by that time it's probably 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he still would have to work until closing, which is 6 o'clock or whatever at the time, maybe 7, I don't know. So what he would do is take a little nap at the store. So he had a little area above a cooler somewhere where he'd climb up the stairs, lie down for an hour or two, and get back up and go back to work. So
he also used to come home and lie on the. Maybe it's a different time, but he used to lie on because he never complained of his back, but I'm thinking maybe his back hurt him. He used to lie on the floor, and I'll ask Stathia, but it's a different time. He's 10 years.
I was too young.
So what do you remember about, the decision and the building of Grocerland? Because when did Grocerland, when did that building start? In the
early 50s. I have all the grand opening stuff.
Do you remember anything about?
Yeah, we had problems because the builder was not honest, so he had a lot of problems with that. And it was like a time, like my dad did very well, but there was a time we didn't have a lot of money because we had to put it all my parents had to put it all into the store. So, it took a while for them to actually build a store because of these problems with the builder, but it was It was a good time. My mom and dad would work. We had to get a babysitter for them, Polly and for you. I mean, my dad and mom had to. My mom.
I don't remember them building. I was too young at the time.
Yeah, I remember. Because I remember when there's problems, you remember as a kid. So there was problems with the builder. My mom and dad never argued, but they always had problems with businesses.
And how long was he continuing to go to South Water Street to get the produce? Do you know about when that ended?
No, for many years. He was.
When you were working there, was he still going? I would think so.
No, he was still going. He died early when he was 66, I think. And before that, I think a little before that, he stopped going and hired somebody else to do the buying.
But I remember he took me, and I was in graduate school. That was in the 60s. Okay. He took me to college, and he didn't drive me all the way to college, but he took me to the train station in his truck. Yeah. Oh, I have a little story. I have a lot of stories. I could give those to you too, because I'm a writer, so I write a lot of stories. But he would take me. That was like 63.
Yeah, yeah. He went to the market close to his mid-60s, till his mid-60s.
And he died when he was
66.
75.
No.
I said in 1974.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned that you were working in the store. Tell me a little bit about your memories of working at Grocerland.
I started working there when I was 12 years old. So I really did not get into sports a lot. Probably because I wasn't a very good athlete. I'd like to think I was pretty good. But anyway, I was working at the store a lot. And I just learned from him that, in order to succeed, you have to work a lot of hours. You have to, put your time and effort into it. And he was all into work. I mean, it was like, since he got here, he was working, and that's what he would do, and it became very successful. So being at the store, I'd get off of work, I'd get out of school, go to the store. Some of the friends would go play on the weekends. I'd have to go on Saturdays and, go work at the store. So I didn't mind it. I did when I was younger. I felt a little, it was a little strange that I could not go out and be with my friends. Instead, I had to be working. But, in the end, it gave me a good work ethic. I understand, what it's all about. But it's the Greek thing. A lot of the Greeks come over and they spent hours, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, doing their job and making sure their families are fed. And a lot of them become very successful. And he was. He did a great job of it. Elmhurst was good to him. And when he did buy the store in Bensonville, which is not too far, right next door, we was able to take that and make that even more successful. And he did very, very well.
Did he want you or anybody in the family to take over that business?
He did.
Well, you did for a while.
Yeah, I was one who took over. I came out of school. I went to school in Wisconsin with a business degree. Came out of school, started full-time working there, and it's ended up, taking over. Unfortunately, right after I got out of school, my father became ill, and we lost him early. And I was younger. I was probably 25 years old at the time. And it was a young time. I mean, I was very young to be taking over that. But yeah, I think that's what they wanted, and that's, I think, what the Greek families really look at giving their businesses to their children.
But they wanted them to have an education, because some of the Greek families didn't want women to go to college, but I never felt that way. I mean, I always felt that I should go. I was encouraged to go, although I was supposed to be a teacher. But as far as the girls, I don't think they particularly cared whether we took over, because that wasn't the thing. Mm-hmm. But I didn't mind working there. In fact, it was an excuse sometimes, because I was in a sorority and I hated to go to the sorority events. So I would say I have to go work. Well, I didn't. I mean, my dad wouldn't care if I came or not, but that was a really good excuse. So I would come from all the way Evanston. I was going Northwestern and go to the store and work. And it was better than, I just didn't enjoy some of the sorority stuff.
Now, did he simultaneously have Grocerland and then this other store in Bensonville?
Yes.
And how long did Grocerland exist until?
Well,
About.
he ended up selling it to one of his nephews. He also built a store, I forgot about this, in Des Plaines. He only had that for about a year where he gave it to his nephews again. So both the Grocerland in Elmhurst and the Grocerland in Des Plaines were sold to his nephews. Then he concentrated on the store in Bensonville at that time.
Do you know in the earlier years, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit, you had mentioned, his dad had previously come a few times to the United States and sent back money. Are you aware if at any point when your dad started working, even though he was very young, was he sending money back home?
Especially during the war, because it was like really difficult.
Yeah.
And they would do care packages. Probably he doesn't know as much, but I was real tiny anyway, because
Right.
when the war was on. But yeah, they would, and then when they would always what the people did here is help the community. So in fact I brought a little picture of the school that they built. So they built a school in Thomopoulos. So they would send money to help the village. And there was another family, not my family, but another family that built a tower for the church and stuff like that they would do. And they've always done that. I mean, the more recent immigrants too have helped. They help with the hospital in Tripoli, that type of thing.
How do you think your dad, since he didn't pursue school once he got here, how do you think he picked up the English language?
By being with the people in public, because they didn't speak, they spoke Greek in the home, in his sister's home.
I would think that he probably took some classes. I don't know for sure.
We don't know exactly,
But I would
we
think.
really don't know.
I mean, he spoke broken English, but it was good. I mean, he had an accent.
He had an accent.
He had an accent. But he was
he'd read the newspapers or magazines.
right. He'd always read. I mean, he knew English. So
Now you talked a little bit about, sort of being very connected to the church, and that was a source for connecting with other Greek families and Greek traditions. Talk to me a little bit more about, just daily life in your home. What were some of the ways in which, your family sort of celebrated through traditions or special holidays to continue any Greek traditions?
number one, my mom was a great cook. I mean, she was excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah, and she would always come up with the Greek dishes and traditional Greek food, which was I really enjoyed, and our family did. So by the food and just hanging out with our cousins, hanging out with our relatives. I mean, I don't think we're what you think a Greek family with the my big fat Greek wedding. I don't think.
Yeah, we had
that.
Greek stuff around the
But
house, though.
it was-
I mean, she decorated. She was very, very classy in terms of the way she decorated her house. But there was always, you could tell it was a Greek house, or so.
And how long did you continue? You said you had attended the Greek school through Assumption.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
No,
But you attended
I had
at
a
any
tutor.
point a Greek school?
There were about 3 families that got together here in Elmhurst, and we brought in a tutor.
Yeah.
And that Lennicus family that I told you about, that my mom was close to, I remember him, and he knew Greek because my dad and mom didn't speak English in the house. I think my mother born here, my mother knew exceptional Greek, but she was born here, and my dad was always talking English at the work. So they would speak English, but they wanted to make sure we knew Greek. So with this tutor, I learned quite well. Once a week, the tutor would come. And I learned better than my husband. My husband was born in the city, and he used to go to school every day. And once a week, I learned better. I don't know why, because he talked Greek in the home. but he was an excellent tutor. Peter didn't have him.
No, I didn't. Greek churches, most of them have a Greek school for the reason they want their families, or the families want their children to learn Greek. So St. Demetrius has their Greek school. Holy Apostles in Westchester has their Greek school.
You went to Holy Apostles.
Well, I went to both, yeah, when I was younger. I went to their Greek school. But most of the churches do have a Greek school that their kids can go to. So that's they believe in keeping that Greek tradition or the Greek language alive in their families. So they would make sure the kids learned it.
And
well.
Holy Apostle came, it's in Westchester, so it was closer. He could go to, I got a diploma or something from the Greek school there.
Well, when they first started, the Greek school was separate from the
But
church.
anyway, I couldn't go an hour to go to the Assumption, so they brought in a tutor. We were sort of isolated here in Elmhurst. There weren't very many Greeks here at all. It was like the real country then.
So did they meet in your home?
Yeah.
Okay.
One time, we used to hide on the Greek teacher. We talked about the truck. The truck was like really prominent in our family. One time we hid in the truck. George Lenicus and I hid in the truck. And my dad decided to drive off. We jumped off the truck, but it was was really funny.
So how long about do you think that you continued to have this tutor come to your home?
I don't know how long. I think I was at least, I think I was reading I don't even know if I could right now, but at the 6th or 7th grade level. Okay. So I don't know if it was that long, but I looked at the books and, but we also had a different tutor after. The one that I really liked was named Carandreo, and he was from Assumption. I don't know where he was from. I don't know if he taught at Assumption, but he was a Salty at Assumption. And I think my other sisters also had a tutor. Stathia, I think, had a tutor. You didn't have a tutor?
I did. I had a tutor. I went to school. I didn't learn as much as my sisters did. I guess I was...
Well, no, because you know what? I worked with the Greek community, and that might be a reason, because I had to learn. I established a social service agency, so I had to know Greek.
So tell me
That's
a little bit
maybe the
about
difference.
your father's involvement with starting helping start the church, and just your memories on, his involvement with St. Demetrios here in Elmhurst.
St. Demetrius started. They had started Holy Apostles first, and the Greek community here in the western suburbs wanted something closer than Westchester. So they decided to start a church, and the first church they leased from a small church on Church Road, as a matter of fact, in Bensonville. And it's still on Church Road, as a matter of fact, in Elmhurst this time. They were there for about a year, 2 years, while they raised money to build a new church, which is the current Greek Orthodox St. Demetrius Church on Church Road. You see off of the expressway when you go out toward Rockford. That church was built in 73, 72, but he was instrumental in raising the money. He had a lot of successful Greek entrepreneurs, they got together, raised the money, went to the bank lent them the money to build a new church, which they did. And that's how it started. So from there, it became very successful and very prominent Greek Orthodox church in the community. There's different types of Greek church. There's more of the Americanized Greek church, which is the Holy Apostles in Westchester. There's other Greek church, more traditional, the people from from Greece itself, who would start these churches and want to keep those special traditions. And those are more conservative. The language was the problem. Yeah, those are more conservative.
The language was the problem. The church is pretty set in the way they look at the religion.
They want to keep the
language was the and now I don't think so much now, because it's changed. But in those days, he was the president for a while, and there was like, people that wanted to keep the Greek language and people that didn't want the language.
So what?
And it was like the people that wanted English would go to Holy Apostles, and those that were more recent immigrants, you talked about the more recent immigrants, mostly those would, wanted to keep the language. And there's a beauty in the language in terms of the liturgy, as far as the choir, and I, it was just, and that was happening all throughout the U.S.
Well,
but that was what was happening at St. Demetrius.
Right,
So
it's
when
true.
St. Demetrios first started their services, were they only in Greek, or they would do a combination of
I
Greek
think it
and
was in
English
Greek,
services?
mostly.
I think eventually they did a combination.
Now I'm sure they do.
Yeah, they do. It's
not the same
the
anymore.
Greek liturgy. Even for Greeks who know Greek, it's hard to understand. But it's an Orthodox church, not meaning they don't change. They don't want to change. It's Greek Orthodox. They want to keep it Greek Orthodox. So, like Elaine said, there's people wanted a more Americanized service, and there are people they gravitated toward Holy Apostles. People who are from Greece who wanted the Greek language and keep it more conservative would go to St. Demetrius. Mm-hmm. And the other parishes were like that too. I mean, other.
But it wasn't different church. It was the same.
Same religion.
Same liturgy, same everything, same. It was just the main thing was the language.
Yep.
I know with the grocery stores that the business kept your dad quite busy. At any point growing up, or are you aware, did he ever make a return trip back to Greece?
Oh yeah, they went. My mom was the first one to go. When I graduated, she took me because I finished my master's in '63. But then they started going very, very often. I should get their passports because they made quite a few trips.
Yep.
Okay.
So.
Do you know? Was your dad when he came? Was the plan that he was going to stay here permanently?
Oh, my dad, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Because my aunt had settled down with her husband, and they were like, probably they started with a peddler, and then they had a grocery store, and they had a house, and they had 6 kids, and my dad was going to stay. He was never going to go back, and he didn't go back till 1935. He came in 21, and he took maybe 34, 35. He took a trip back, and then he didn't go again till. I don't know if he went again in the 60s or the 70s, but then they would start, because he had a brother there. Mm-hmm. He had a brother. My cousins I still go see, because one of my cousins, his brother's daughter came here, but the other 2 stayed there. So.
Was your dad the oldest boy in his family?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But he had 2 older sisters, and it's very interesting. I brought a picture of him and his. And his brother, but they didn't take the sisters. Oh. Women were like second-class citizens, I guess, and he doted on, having sons. That was the thing, and like many ethnic groups.
At any point growing up, I know you had, mentioned, that there was a preference for you to marry another Greek. At any point, were you, either of you, criticized by your dad or teased for maybe being, too American or straying from certain traditions that he felt were important, but
no, because I was straight and narrow, so I don't know about him, but I wouldn't even date anybody that wasn't Greek.
Okay.
And luckily, I found a really good husband who was Greek.
Yeah.
And my mom liked him, so that was okay. So the only thing she didn't like is that wasn't that straying from tradition. She didn't like it when I decided to give up teaching. Because that's, how could you give up teaching? You're going back to school. What do you want to go back to school for? Maybe nobody will marry you. You've got a master's degree, but not the Greek stuff, because I was very Greek. I mean, I did everything Greek. I'm still doing. I'm writing books about Greece.
I think there's 2 types of Greek families. The ones that are more Americanized, like ours, I believe. The ones who are very, very Greek are the ones whose husband and wife both came from Greece. They speak Greek at the home. But that didn't happen with us. I think because of my mom, it's less traditional Greek than other Greek families. So you talk to another Greek family where their parents both were from Greece, and it'd be a little different story, I think. For us, it's my mother, because she grew up in America and she lived here, and she was American first rather than Greek. I think that made a difference as far as how our family was brought up.
I think it's a difference in generations, because I see
and
things.
Generations too now.
I mean, I'm talking about you and me.
Oh, well, that too.
Because I felt very Greek, that they were very Greek. And it's interesting, his perspective.
No, Dad was, but you got to understand, my father didn't talk a lot. He really didn't.
No, he was
very quiet as far as the past and what he did. And
anything.
Yeah. I mean, he just really didn't talk a lot. So my mother would tell us, stories and everything, but...
she didn't talk a lot either.
Yeah.
About herself. She didn't like to talk about herself.
So, no.
Either of you have families of your own and children of your own. What from your sort of, Greek ancestry was important for you to pass on to your own families?
I had a mixed marriage with an Italian girl. So my son was brought up probably less Greek than he was. He went to Catholic school. We wanted him to go to a private school, and there are some good Catholic schools where we were. So he did not really come up. He was not really brought up as quote quote Greek. And your children, I think.
None of my children married Greek, and they're not really close. He said the conservative, and the Greek Orthodox Church is very conservative, and the young people today, are much more liberal, and they're not, except for Diana, and maybe because she went to a Greek camp year after year, and she went to a camp, and Diana's the third daughter. Went to a camp in Greece. She went to a camp, Greek Orthodox Church camp in Greece. She's more close to the Greek traditions. They like the food. We've taken them. My husband and I have taken them to Greece, and I still take them, and my husband passed away, to Greece very often, so that they feel Greek, and but they don't know a lot of Greek. And my grandchildren are interested also. They love Greece. Mm-hmm. But not as Greek, you get away from that. Sure. And so, but the tradition is still with them as far as the Greek tradition.
Did your dad pursue citizenship here in the U.S.?
Oh, yeah, right away. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did he talk at all about his process or his feelings when he became a citizen or anything?
No, he never talked. So
No, he didn't.
He probably he didn't, but he did. I mean, I found his naturalization papers and all. So he did. He became a citizen, and fairly early. I mean, I don't remember. I probably have his naturalization papers with me, but I don't recall what year it was. But he was very much, an American as well as a Greek. I mean, it's like you have two countries. Even me, I feel like both Greek and American. Can't separate it.
One of my questions is sort of maybe how he felt, or how you felt like he may have identified himself.
I think
so kind of split.
Close to both, yeah.
Do you think at any point did he ever? Again, you said he was very quiet, but would there have ever been a time where you would have thought he would have moved back?
Never.
Or he was here.
Never. And don't forget that it might not be the same with other ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. It was very difficult. I mean, I don't think he would have decided again, would have gone anyway, but a lot of times there was so many wars. There was World War II, and then there was a Civil War. But he never would have even thought of going back. Never.
And what of he had another sister and a brother. But did they ever come?
Yeah,
to the
his
United
two
States?
sisters were here.
Yep.
Okay, and
His
but
brother
he had
stayed.
a brother who stayed.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Any comments about, sort of thinking back, growing up with your dad, but also your mom, who also kept a lot of the traditions? What things for you were some of those special memories that kind of connected you to the great community?
As growing up, the Greek community has what they call a cotillion. I don't know if they still have it or not, but it's the coming out for the
I should have brought those photos.
the young Greeks, teenagers, and you meet. All the parents would want their children to go there to meet other Greeks from the opposite sex, so they can meet somebody. They're always out there trying to meet somebody. I mean, as far as being Greek, I feel myself, I am very Greek. Always looking for Greek names. I'm looking at the movie credits and looking at seeing the Greek names. It's going to be with me forever. But I feel that my heritage is Greek. I understand it. I was brought up to be a Greek, but I'm more American than I am Greek. So.
And Elaine, you kind of made a comment that you still very much feel like
Yeah, and it's like I've spent a lot of my career. Not that I don't do other things too, but I worked with the Greeks. I've written 2 books about Greece, and I travel a lot. I still feel I'm American, but it's like you have both of those heritages.
Yeah.
So these next few questions, I know, immigration is and continues to be a very, controversial topic, in the United States, and thinking about, your dad's process and when he came and things that have happened more recently. If you could kind of summarize your thoughts on sort of where the U.S. is now with their immigration policies, what kinds of things would you say?
I'm under the impression that America was built by immigrants. And that is what I believe in. I think to tell immigrants they cannot no longer come here is not the way our country was built. And I believe that it's going to be, in the end, going to be bad for the country to keep people out. Because a lot of good people have come through those gates into America, become citizens, hardworking citizens of the United States, and have done great things. And to keep those people out, I totally want the Americans to believe that our country is a country of immigrants, period. And we came in and displaced some the indigenous people, and we did some bad things to them. But I mean, we also did good things to make our country the way it is. Well,
the immigrants have helped a lot. I agree.
The immigrants is what built this country. So I believe in immigration. I totally do.
The U.S. has kind of been known as kind of like, or has been referred to at times as a melting pot. Do you feel like you agree with that ideal? And why not? Or
well,
why?
First of all, I agree exactly what he says, and especially because we need the manpower right now, and it's like, what are we doing? It's like we can't get workers. What are we doing? And like he said, the immigrants have added so much. I don't think it's a melting pot, and I think that's part of the. I was very active with an organization that was a multi-ethnic kind of organization, the Ethnic Coalition, and the idea is like you could still retain your ethnicity and still be part of the American, and it's more like a mosaic kind of thing rather than a melting pot. And I don't think it needs to be a melting pot. I think that's the beauty of it, because I learned so much, from other ethnic groups, and you gain so much from being here because it is multi-ethnic.
Right.
It doesn't need to be a melting pot.
I think if you look at the restaurant industry, when the Greeks came here, they started working in restaurants, and the restaurants were owned by a lot of Jewish people. So when the Jewish people had their children, they would grow up and they would go to school and they become doctors and lawyers. Well, what happens with Greek people who are working in the restaurants ended up buying those restaurants. So now you have a lot of Greek restaurants, or people who are Greek that own restaurants. They would come in and hire Hispanic people to work, the kitchen, work, the bus boys or whatever. And what's happening now with the Greek community is their children are growing up, becoming doctors and lawyers, and not going back to the restaurants. And guess what? A lot of Hispanics are buying these restaurants. I mean, it's a natural thing. I mean, it happens, and they're becoming successful, and they're good at it. So, I just think it's having immigration, having people coming in, it's a natural thing, and it makes sense to me, anyway.
I'm glad we both agree.
I know something.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Is there any little side notes or stories about your family life or about your dad that you want to take this opportunity to share?
I'm glad I grew up in Elmhurst. I love the community. I think it's still very, very vibrant, and it's a great community to be in. I went to York High School, and proud of it. I'm glad I grew up here.
And were you in the same house the whole time? Did you?
When I was born, we were at 230 Michigan. When I was in second grade or third grade, I think we moved to Brenhaven. And then we lived there. Until we moved.
And
out.
my daughter bought that house. My eldest daughter is still in Elmhurst.
Yep.
And what's the address in the Brenhaven?
303 Poplar.
303
Now
Poplar.
she bought it and she stayed there for a while, but she wanted to be closer to the city center, and so she now has a house
on
Larch Street. But it was, maybe I would have been more happy growing up. And you asked, I didn't feel discriminated against, but it wasn't like other lot of ethnic. It was very German when I was here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a different kind of community, and I liked the community, but I still like the community. I'm glad my daughter is here.
Dan, do you have any questions?
What became of that final large store in Bensonville?
It's part of O'Hare Airport.
Oh, is that what happened to it?
Yes, they needed it. It's not a runway per se, but they needed that land to give it a runway, a clear shot without any homes or anything else, so planes could land there. So they had to raise it.
It was actually a big shopping center. It was like, was like more than the store. It was like
they took.
I mean, my dad had the whole shopping center. So
it's funny. York Road and Green Street, and toward the airport at that corner is completely empty. Where before there were townhomes, there were businesses, there were hardware stores. It's just a field. It's just a field now. So.
Well, thank you to the both of you
No,
for
I'm
everything
very
that you
pleased to come.
shared with us today.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.